the sake of etiquette, if everyone could put themselves on mute, yeah, while I'm doing the presentation, and then we'll open it up at the end, yeah. I'm not going to spend a long time on this presentation, yeah, which is probably good news, yeah. So no death by slideware, yeah. But I just wanted to share with you just a few things, yeah. Obviously, we're living in a time of crisis. I'm sure none of us have experienced anything like this before, yeah. Even though we might have experienced lots of different and potentially negative things. But so this morning, yeah, just what I wanted to share with you is one, around the whole business of working capital, cash flow, what people usually should be doing, yeah. But if you haven't been doing that and you do find yourself in stuck, as it were, yeah, then what are the things you should be doing now as kind of emergency reactions? So firstly, just a little bit of what I call obligatory advertising, yeah. So just if you don't know anything about Informita is basically, you know, my nomenclature, yeah. I've been working in the subject of working capital and procurement now for 26 years, in all sorts of countries all across the world. These are just a selection of more recent clients, yeah, mainly European, but also in North America and Asia as well. And in terms of how you engage with Informita is basically a management consulting firm focused on procurement and working capital, yeah. But also there's the terms check offering, which is a payment terms database. So you can compare all the payment terms you have either with your customers or suppliers with the database. It's about 1 million entries in there from 180 plus countries. If you don't want to talk at all and you just want to listen to something, then there's the Working Capitalist podcast, which I do with my friend Lane Burkett, who's from Arizona. So we kind of get a bit more of a global view on things, simply because we don't always have the same opinions because we're in different parts of the world. Or if you really can't be done with any of that stuff, just buy a book off Amazon, like the Working Capital Handbook, and there's 5 others as well. So go there, have fun. Yeah. So advertising over. Yeah. So question. So what are the usual things that I would be talking to people about working capital? Well, very simply, and I should emphasize that what I do, I talk about what a lot of people would call operational working capital. So I'm not a treasurer. I'm not talking about cash balances and how you invested in overnight markets and stuff like that. What I'm about is people looking at their trade accounts receivable, trade payables, and their inventories. Yeah, and you know, and the goal in this, you know, many accountants would just say, just have as little as you can. Yeah, well, theoretically that's great, but that's not reality. So, for instance, on receivables, yeah, you could, in a perfect world, you wouldn't offer credit to anybody. Yeah? But then, depending on the market you're in, you might not be doing a lot of business if you did that. Yeah. So we have to adjust ourselves depending on what market we're in, what country, particular business sector. So, for instance, if I went to Egypt and expected to get payment for an invoice in 30 days, it's probably pretty unlikely. Yeah, that's just the way that country operates in terms of these things. On the other hand, if I was in Sweden and I wanted 30 days, totally normal. And not only that, if you don't pay by day 33, I'll send you an extra invoice for interest for overdue payment. Completely normal. Yeah. So different countries have different norms. But what is important here is that the way you set your business up. So, for instance, because I'm a working capital guy, all my payment terms are 60 days. Why? Because I have to practice what I preach. Yeah, and clients like that. Yeah, but that's the way I've set my business up. Could I have my terms shorter? Yes, I could. Or sometimes people ask for longer terms. Do I do it? Generally, no. Yeah, but that's not always a choice you have, depending on the business you're in and how competitive it is. But there is one key thing, that if you set your business up with the wrong payment terms, then at times like this is when it's going to hurt when things go wrong. So an example would be in the building sector, many people do stage payments. Yeah. Well, for some reason, if the building program gets stalled, yeah, then you have no more cash coming in and your business fails, and that can easily happen. Or if we're in the tourist trade, well, it's great news to say that when someone shows up in your hotel, they pay by credit card, you get paid 2 days later. That's fantastic. Yeah, as long as people are showing up in your hotel. which is the issue we have right now. So you've got no cash coming in the door, and you still have all the expenses going out the back, which is where we get onto the payable side. And it's, we all have bills to pay, and depending on our business, service business, so my overheads are extremely low. But take the example of a hotel. We have the receptionist and the cleaning staff, and these are all people who need to get paid, and usually are salaried people. So if I've got nothing coming in the front door, I still have my expenses going out the back door, I have a major problem. But again, you'll see with businesses across Europe at the moment, many are taking action to this. So for instance, some of the big supermarkets in different countries are taking action right now to actually pay their suppliers immediately, because they want to secure their supply chain. Equally, I've seen, one big American multinational, which has a very strong presence in Europe in the restaurant trade, has just extended all its terms by another 30 days, unilaterally. And if you don't want to trade with them, then don't accept the term. So there's people are doing different things at the moment. The last thing is about inventories. And again, an accountant would always say, well, have as little inventory as you can because it's just money tied up there. That actually doesn't make a lot of sense, because the other side of it, particularly if you talk to a retailer will always tell you that if it's not on the shelf, I can't sell it. So I have to have some inventory. The trick is having the right amount of inventory, not too much, not too little. And that varies wildly. Or else, even if you're not in a stock business, I'll give an example. I was working in a cement factory recently. They have spare parts which they need to maintain the plant. Some of these spare parts have been around since 1957. So how do you keep track of all these things and make sure that one bit that goes wrong once every 10 years, that I make sure I have it when I need it, or else the plant shuts down, which is an extremely expensive thing to restart a cement plant, by the way. So anyway, they're the normal things. So problem now is that if you haven't set yourself up correctly, this is now with a crisis like this, where everyone's going to fall off the cliff at some point. It's a case of how long before you hit the ground. So if I move on, the first, anyone who's ever watched Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a pretty old show now, so I'm showing my age. If you open page 1, it says, "Don't panic," which is always a good thing to remember. However, it's also good to, there was a very good thing that they had in there, was a special set of sunglasses, which recognized danger. And as a sign of any danger would go completely black, so you couldn't see whatever it was, and the principle being that what you don't know won't harm you, that is not good advice at the moment, now is the time to keep your eyes very wide open and very realistic, and I'd say even brutally realistic, Many of the scenarios that need to be thought about right now are things that, quite frankly, none of us want to think about, and that moves me very swiftly on to, so what are the 10 things? Now, you don't have to do all of these 10 things. If you have to do less than 10, that's good news. But I was just saying earlier to Arnold, one of my personal measures in business is, if nobody did any business with me from today onwards forever, how long would it be before I go broke? And I've always done that, and that's my business security. If you're in a salaried job, it's different. If I don't get my paycheck this week, how long before I can't pay my mortgage and my rent and all those things, but it's the same basic principle. How long before it's absolute ground zero. And what you're seeing right now with lots of major businesses around the world is they're in what I'll call scenario planning mode. So they've been hit by this shock. They weren't expecting it. They're not quite sure what to do, how fast it's going to be. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a CEO in the construction industry in Porto, and he tells me that we all know the construction industry is slowing down fast. Their problem is how fast and how much stock do they have, which now they won't be able to sell, because so when do they shut down production? What do they shut down production of? How soon before we start laying off people? How are we going to pay for it? There's a multitude of things which they have to go through. And one side effect of that is anyone who's trying to sell any kind of services to corporates right now, you're going absolutely nowhere because everyone is focused on the emergency. Yeah. How long before I fall off that cliff? Yeah. Now, if it's a thing that you've done that and you figure out that, yes, I've got a problem, yeah, most of us, well, not all of us, but most of us, yeah, we owe money to somebody in some way. So it could be we have an overdraft. It could be, bigger companies have, term bonds and things like this. It could be as simple as, I've laid up on the credit card. Yeah, that's a way I fund my business in different ways. Yeah. So it may be that you actually do need to talk to your lenders, yeah, because can you actually service the debt that you've got? And they're the people who'll shut you down first if it's a thing that you can't pay. Many people try to stick their head in the sand and, maybe it'll all go away. Maybe I'll be okay. Yeah. Well, that's a very, very bad thing to do. Yeah. The very first thing, think of things like car loans, all those things. Speak to whoever the lender is. Now, the good news is that in many countries already, the banks and various lenders have been told that, to give people like 3-month moratoriums on their debt and stuff like that. Exercise these things. Do it now. Don't wait. Yeah. Because the sooner you do these things, the sooner you'll get some relief. And let's face it, we don't know how long this is going to last. So if it lasts, Trump time of 2 weeks, then maybe this is not required. Yeah. On the other hand, if it lasts Fauci time of 3 to 6 months, yeah, then we have a whole different scenario there. So it's important that to use the facilities that you got. But remember one thing with banks and lending institutions in general: if you don't tell them until you really, really can't pay, that's the time when they'll be able to do the least for you. And that's very important to remember, whatever type of lending that you're engaged with. The next thing is sell something. Yeah. Now this is not always easy. Yeah. And particularly now it's not easy because to have a seller you have to have a buyer. Yeah. So if we talk about selling anything at the moment, it's really difficult. I mean, even if someone said, sell your car. Yeah. Well, who's going to buy your car at the moment? Because they can't go out and look at it. Yeah. So you're kind of stuffed on that front. But even for big corporates, they might say, oh, I'll sell this division here. That's great. But if they didn't have an active suitor, and probably they've been talking for months, then that's probably not a huge option at the moment. But that's something that people are going to have to consider. And of course, whenever you go down that route of selling something, the probability is that you're selling the family jewels first, rather than the stuff that you really did want to get rid of. Yeah, which you'll just not get a whole lot for. Yeah. The next bit, which is kind of probably more normal to lots of people, is reducing costs. So take my hotel example. Yeah. So if I got no more money coming in the front door, well, I'm going to have to cut my expenses fast. Now, this is problematic because many of these places, if you have good staff, they've been there for years, they know what they're doing, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. You would actually like to retain them because you know that when things bounce back, you're going to need these people because they're the people with expertise. You don't want to go through a process where you fire everybody and then 6 months down the road, you have to hire people back. But now you're hiring people with no experience of your business, no background in it. And it's like a gigantic training program all over again, which will be a difficulty later on when things kick off. But the other side of it is you have to stop bleeding cash, because it's the day when the balance runs to zero or well into the red, that's when it's over. So it's striking that very difficult balance. And for anyone who's ever had to let anybody go before, it's just not fun. Yeah, it's a horrible process, either for the person who's getting laid off or the person who has to lay the person off. Yeah, it's not fun. Yeah, but like lots of things, the earlier you take action, the quicker you'll see some result on that. The next one is around capital expenditure. Sometimes we have programs going on, like we're implementing some new software program where we're going to buy a new fleet of cars. We're going to roll them over. What? Stop it. Stop it dead. Yeah. Best thing is to try and pause, because you find with many of these things, they have some kind of clause in there of penalty payments if you just cancel. So try to at least pause them, yeah, so that you're stopping short-term expenditure. And this is all very short-term stuff, because some of this actually might prove to be, in the long run, destructive to your business. But you have to do it, because if you don't have cash now, yeah, then there will be no future of your business to fix later. The next one is about reducing capacity. If you're in some kind of a manufacturing operation, there is a tendency to say, well, every week we make X number of units. Yeah. Well, if you're not selling them, you shouldn't be making them. Now that sounds easy, but the problem is there's always a time lag between when do you find out that things have slowed down versus I have to stop making this stuff. So I'll give you an example. Company up in the north of Portugal, they make laminate floorings. Yeah. So their factories do this. They make so much every week, and it's a production plan. It goes over the whole year. So when they see the demand signal dropping this fast, they literally have to decide, what are we going to switch off? And that's difficult, because then they have to figure out, well, which stocks are going to go first. And they have 60 plants, by the way. So which plants am I going to shut down? Yeah. Very, very difficult decision. The good news about this is that if you do it right, your stocks will start running down very quickly, and that's better, because then it's not tied up in cash. Bad news about that is when things kick up again, it's going to take another time lag to get things started, to get everything back in place again, so you can actually make active sales. The next one is around your supplier relationships. Many years ago, I worked for a company for about 10 months, and we were deeply insolvent. Yeah. So one of my jobs, yeah, was deciding who got paid. Yeah. And I had a chart on the wall of all my major suppliers, yeah, which was a grid of suppliers down this way, excuses that way. Yeah. So people would ring me up and say, why didn't I get paid last Friday? And I had to make up a whole bunch of excuses, like, the managing director was away on holidays and couldn't sign the check. The dog ate the invoice. Yeah, I mean, it went on. Yeah, but of course I had to make sure I didn't use the same excuse twice. Now, the bad side of that, that was deeply stressful, by the way. I really don't ever want to do that again in my life. Yeah. But the bad news about that is that if suppliers don't believe you, they will cut you off. And depending on what you do, that supply might be absolutely vital to your business. And then you can forget about all the cash stuff. If you have no supply, then you can't deliver to your customer, your business is finished. So if you're having problems like this, you should talk to your suppliers and say, listen, I've got a bit of an issue right now because of this, bum, 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 bum. The vast majority of people will be understanding, because remember, from a supplier's point of view, they want to maintain their business with you. Everybody knows this is going to bounce back. So they want to have customers when this is all over. So talk to them. Don't just simply not pay people, because that's a recipe for disaster. And of course, also, if you don't pay people, lots of people talk to each other. Oh, did you hear that X Limited didn't pay last week? Oh, maybe they're in trouble. Word goes around like that, and that for the reputation of your business can be quite damaging. The next one is around talking to your customers. So I mentioned around the supermarkets and people like that. They need stuff to be on the shelf, or they can't sell it. So they're quite open to the idea in many cases of supporting particularly smaller suppliers who don't have the access to banking facilities and so on that the big corporates do, because they want to keep you alive. There's an old joke in supermarket procurement that the skill is how to strangle you without actually killing you. Yeah. And they do it very well over the years. Yeah. So sometimes not a very pleasant experience, but they do actually want to keep you alive. So again, they're worth talking to, because as you can see with many big retailers all across Europe, yeah, many of them are kicking in schemes where they're simply paying early, they're opening up people to supply chain finance schemes, et cetera, to make sure that there's cash available to keep you going. Now, if you've done all those things, yeah, and you still have a problem, probably the next person is talking to the tax man. So this is VAT, IVA, yeah, that's usually the first one that comes up every quarter. Always always with a taxman of any variety in any country, you have a problem, talk to them, yeah, because the very minute you have said nothing and you don't pay the bill, they'll just close you down. Automatic. That's what they do, yeah. So you do need to talk to them. Many of them will be sympathetic, yeah, especially in times like this. Many authorities are being told again to defer bills, whether it's corporation tax, VAT, etc., etc., yeah, and possibly even employee taxes, depending on the country you're in, yeah. And of course, there's many schemes going in many countries now, effectively paying a large percentage of employee wages while this is going on. So it's imperative to talk to these folks quickly. Problem that they're having at the moment is that everybody wants to talk to them. So if you're going to do this, you need to be doing it now and be persistent. Yeah. Now you're kind of at the end of the line. You've probably done everything you possibly can do without turning religious in any way. And if you've done all that, yeah, and you're still not getting anywhere, quite frankly, it's time to close the doors. And one of the big mistakes that you see in many businesses that go bankrupt is they leave it too late. And the consequence of that is, you know, the shareholders and so on, they still get wiped out just the same. But if we talk about employees and redundancy and creditors getting paid and so on, they all get trashed. So it's from an ethical perspective, if you know this is going to happen and it does impact on creditors and employees and so on, quite frankly, do it quickly, because then there's more likely to be a good result or a better result for those stakeholders. And that's it, yeah. And after all that, I always show pictures of money, because the one thing about working capital, unlike an IT project, yeah, you can do an IT project and it's an opinion whether it went well or not, yeah. If you do a working capital project, it's all about cash. It's either there or it isn't. It's extremely binary. So from my perspective, when I work with people, I know whether I'm successful or not because of you know, because of lovely cash, yeah, not because anyone's opinion. Any questions, folks?
Thanks, Brian. That was really good. A quick question for you. I know that a lot of people will be getting things like their people they supply into will suddenly turn around and say, okay, you know, we're not accepting invoices unless you've discounted by 50%. How do you go into those negotiations? Because clearly you want to keep them as suppliers or you know, people, customers, but you can't obviously take a hit of 50% just because they've directed you to.
Well, I'd say that's a very difficult situation, obviously, and there's times when some of us will have to give into that. Yeah, we just have no choice. You know, I mean, it's deeply unpreferable to do such a thing. But if that, I mean, I've had this happen to me in the past, yeah, and my reply to that is, well, one, that's a pretty sharp practice, yeah, and secondly, just I'm going to remember this, yeah. So you might have me now, but I'm going to remember you, yeah. And when things get better again, that's not going to look good for you, yeah. I mean, one of the things, just from a pure procurement point of view, I always say to procurement professionals that if you have a supplier where you have no strategy for how you deal with them, then you failed. You're not doing your job. Yeah. Now, sometimes the strategy is a very short-term thing about managing price or managing service levels. Sometimes it's a long-term thing. Yeah. About you know, listen, you do this to me now, which is going to hurt me. I'm going to do something to you later, which is going to hurt you even more. So that's the kind of conversation you have to have, yeah, even though you might have to give into it in the short run. Does that answer the question, Eva?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anybody else?
I would like to thank you for your presentation so much.
Thank
it
you.
was very interesting to listen to what you're saying. I think at this time it's difficult to find a strategy that brings that keeps business going on, and at the same time suppliers, customers, everyone are in the same situation. Customers have less money, suppliers need to pay bills, and we are all stuck in this big confusion. I agree with you when you say that we need to define strategies, and I believe most of the suppliers at the moment don't have any other choice than organize something that is good for everyone. My question to you is, what about before all of this, investments and were developing, and we could see even the construction coming up, especially here in Algarve. We could see it all over the country and to many places, but Algarve, we could see it coming more. And now, obviously, everything is stopped. Do you believe that, and I'm not talking about 3 or 6 months, I'm talking about recovering or starting to recover next year? Not before that. I don't see it before that. Do you believe things will start coming more fluently for the business in terms of construction and even tourism? Because this year is just to let it keep going and see what we can have and what you can get. And maybe I believe next year it will be a better year. As we all know, after a year of crisis, always comes something good. What do you think about it?
I think 2020 for almost everybody, almost everybody, and this is global. It's not just in the Algarve where you and me live.
Yes.
This is a year of survival.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Yeah.
I agree totally with you. Yeah.
And but the facts are, that go back to that earlier point about I was talking about working capital strategy. The people who will suffer the most are the people who did not think about how they set themselves up working capital wise before all this happened. Because the reality of, any of us who are in business for ourselves, things happen, events happen, and they will always happen, and we have no idea what they're going to be. So all we can ever do, is have kind of the rainy day money, to say something's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to be, but if it happens, I'm okay for a while. Now, many business people don't think like that. You'd be surprised. Many very, very big businesses don't think like that. It's not just small businesses.
Portugal.
It's all over the world. It's all over the world. I take a particularly Portuguese thing. Big businesses here in Portugal are very sharp on controlling costs down to the most minuscule level. But then the balance sheet, they're not looking at it at all. And it's this principle of if I manage the costs, everything else will manage itself. Well, sometimes that's true. A lot of times not true. That's why, personally, when I look at my business, if you ask me about my business health, I don't go to my P&L and say, oh, look at all the profits I've made this year. I go to my balance sheet and say, what's the bank account going to look like in 3 months? That's reality. Because I can have all the remember an American company called Enron, who went broke in about 2003 or something. They had profits running out the door. Their stock price was way up. They ran out of cash. I mean, they were fraudulent as well, but it was the cash that caught them, not the profits. No one had any idea what was going on. So this is a time when cash is king. I mean, an old German friend of mine used to say to me that the person who's got cash in their pocket has choices. And going back to Aoife's question earlier, when you don't have that cash, this is the time where you're going to have to make very unpalatable decisions. You're going to have to agree to things that you really, really don't want to do. But you may have to do them. And quite frankly, the quicker you bite the bullet in many of these cases, the better it is. I mean, an old boss of mine used to say, when you're managing bad news, do it very quickly. Whatever the bad news is, do it extremely quickly, because you just get over that pain as quickly as you possibly can. Equally, if it's good news, keep talking about it all day and night. But when it comes to bad news, deal with it quickly and deal with it realistically, because the other thing is that you're going to have many people who are going to say, oh, well, maybe this will be over in, X number of weeks. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. Yeah. Are we going to see, hotel bookings suddenly, completely stuff the Algarve out by June? It's possible. It's probably pretty unlikely. Yeah. But and that's where people need to be realistic, that if you're doing that scenario right now, you really have to be planning for the absolute worst case scenario. Because then if anything happens, one, it's a bonus, and that bonus will motivate you, yeah, as things go through. But I seriously believe that, particularly when you're talking about, the Algarve, which relies on tourism, yeah, basically 2020 is gone, yeah. So it's a case of, can people survive to this time next year? Then they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
The tourism thing is funny, Brian, because they, there's this movement in the Algarve in particular to try and stretch the season. And this is the perfect opportunity to do that and to think of how you would do that. But whether people see that or not is a different, if they go with the old fatalistic, the season is over in October and we won't have had it, they'll get what they always got, if you know what I mean. But they really do need to reimagine how they stretch the seasonal aspect of their business now. It's a really interesting challenge. I really hope some people step up to it. I only say that because that's what was my business was for years,
I agree with you, Aoife, and I'd say particularly, I know you've been involved in this in terms of tourism in Ireland, yeah, to kind of, rethink the traditional things, why do people go to Ireland? Well, people go to Ireland for, the crack and a few pints of Guinness and things like that. But then you have to think of other things, yeah. I think you did the prawn festival in Hove, yeah. That's an example. Prawns are there all year round, yeah, but you do something else. But if you take, say, the Portugal in general, what do people know Portugal for in a tourist sense? Well, there's beautiful beaches and surfing and sunshine and wonderful weather and all that kind of stuff, yeah. But I'll tell you now, I mean, it surprises me. I go around the world and talk about Portuguese wine and Portuguese cheese, and no one's ever heard of any of this stuff. Portugal as a country is one of the worst marketed in terms of tourism going. It's really terrible, and there's so many things. I remember being up in the mountains in the middle of the country, and there's whole shops just for cheese. I mean, there's very few countries in the world, that happens. Yeah, but to your point, David, these are the kinds of things which need to be sold to get different people, to come along here. Or if I go out to Sagres, yeah. There's all the surfers and the all those people are out there, but it's actually a huge stock of history around the place. Very few people go there to see the history. So there's a whole bunch of different things, but the same is also true in our own businesses. I mean, I was just saying to Arnold earlier, yeah, one of the things I'm doing, yeah, is I'm trying to figure out, okay, how can I work with businesses completely remotely? Now, I do a lot of this anyway, yeah, but usually when people talk about consulting, I have to meet somebody, shake their hand, I can't do that at the moment, and generate that whole kind of relationship stuff and all that. That's generally what consulting is, and most consulting also involves being at the client office, drinking their coffee all day and occupying an office and day rates and all that. I mean, I don't do that anyway. So one of the things I'm doing with my terms check offering, which is completely remote, is over the next couple of weeks, we're ramping up the marketing of that in the US. Yeah, big market. Yeah, I'm not going to be traveling there anytime in the future. So it's how do we do that? Now that's just an idea. Yeah, but I'm playing with other ideas as well. And the one thing that I'm doing, because there's certain things I can control and can't control. So I can't. There's very few real business conversations going on the consulting side right now, because quite frankly, all my potential clients are hunkering down, trying to figure out what they're going to do emergency wise. Yeah. So the one thing I can do right now is I can market, and I'm banging that drum real hard. Yeah. And I'm going to keep at it, because what tends to happen with most of us is that at some point we're all going to get busy again, and then the opportunity for doing these things or thinking of new ideas for your business, et cetera, the opportunity will be gone, because now you're going to be busy again. So busy is a good complaint in many ways, yeah. But in terms of trying to do something different in your business, now is the time. It's a real opportunity.
And just to finish out, Brian, just if you were to go into a company now at the moment, what typically do you think you would be doing?
The very, very first thing, is looking at your customer. Who's paying you, who isn't? The very first thing, And one of the things, particularly in small business, people are afraid to ask their customers for money. That is, well, at all times, that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. If you've earned your money, you've got a right to ask for it. That doesn't mean you have to, bring a baseball bat to their office or anything like that. You can ask politely, but by all means, do ask and ask the right people. So let me give you an example of that. If you're in, say, the construction industry, who do you ask to get the bill paid? Well, you could talk to the site foreman, well, what's happening in head office and all that. Or you could actually find out, well, who's the person who cuts the check? Who signs the check? Find out who it is, and talk to them. So, hello, this is me. I've got an outstanding for X thousand euro. When am I going to get paid? That didn't break anybody's bones, did it? That's a fair question to ask. And you should be asking it of everybody. And you have a right to do that. This is the very first short-term thing to do. Make sure you keep having that money coming in. And also, there's a risk element, because what if you're dealing with businesses that actually are at risk themselves and you don't know? So don't wait for your money. Go get it as quickly as you can.
Great. Anybody else? Any questions?
I can make a comment if I can. I really appreciate the subject. Actually, people know that working capital days can decrease a lot your costs if you have to finance yourself, or otherwise give you capacity for new investments. And the funny thing is, I think, and people here, I say on this forum, most of us, we work, we mix a bit personal life with the financial life, because most of us have companies. So I think it's also important to have this on a personal level. And I actually have been doing this for about 20 years. So every last day of the month, I do my accounting, personal accounting, as I was a company. And the funny thing, the first time I did this long time ago was completely different, but is that the insights you get by having measures every single month, how things are progressing. People say when you measure, you don't change things, but the insights will turn your philosophy. So for instance, I have on my personal accounting, a few items, KPIs I put there is how much cash do I have in the safe at home? I have a percentage. How much liquidity do I have to live how many years? So at the moment I was looking today, liquidity, I'm not talking about the value I have, but the money I have in bank accounts that can be, because I've categorized the money in 4 different types. Solid, which is real estate, then you have liquidity, you know what it is, but there's 3 other areas, because stocks and other things, I mix them up. So it's what cash do I have and how long will I live with it, taking into account the 12 last months average of spending. So all those things gives a lot of insights. I would actually, I know a few people, for instance, that don't like credit cards because they lose control. I think credit cards are great. They push the payments forward. They give me some bonus on some cases. It's amazing. So having control is also good. So it's actually the worst time to be talking about this subject. This should have been 6 months ago, to be honest. That's,
no, I agree with you, Helder. And actually, interesting point about credit cards. Now, I'm not encouraging people to rack up debt on credit cards. But do you know one thing I have never done? I have never closed a credit card account. So even though I might not use the card, I still have it. And the reason is because, I mean, I told you about my personal measure that I measure how long it is before I run out of cash. Also, the reason those credit cards are never canceled is if I ever had to use them, I have thousands of euro of liquidity potentially if I had to use it.
Exactly.
I don't intend to, but it's there.
And for those who like credit cards, I recommend Curve. It's a credit card that you use that. Yeah, I have the same. So I take all the advantage I can from credit cards.
But at the same time, you don't really want to use them because the interest rates on them are just
no. Horrible. What I have is everything at 100%, and I don't think I'm spending this money, which I don't have. I'm just spending the money I have. I'm doing normal shopping. I'm not taking the credit card as let's borrow into the future. It's just, I have an expense now. I better off pay it later than now.
Yeah. And sometimes I did this very early on in the business, yeah, when cash was a bit tight, yeah, in the first few months, and you know, transferring balances, yeah, and they give you the special offer of, you know, it's interest free for 12 months, you know, but they charge you 2 or 3% of the transfer. I mean, effectively, that's a 2 or 3% interest rate for 12 months. That's cheap money. Yeah?
Now that we are on that, there are several tricks. I mean, I have Revolut, then I have WizInc. Every month I transfer 8 grand to the Revolut and straight ahead to my bank account to pay the credit card afterwards. And every 15K I spend on that card gives me 100 euros in Sonai. So every second month, without doing anything, I earn 100 euros in shopping. And obviously the interest rate I get for the money in the bank account for a month, I'm not counting it at the moment, but all those things gives you liquidity, which you can use to. You just need to have control and know exactly.
Right.
If you have control, you know if you can spend the money or not. If you don't know your net worth and how it's distributed and your expenses.
And I say one other thing, Helder, you know, one thing that's important, and lots of small business people don't do this, keep up to date with your accounting. Yeah, it might not be the most exciting thing in the world. Yeah, usually it isn't. Yeah, but it's vital, because sometimes you're actually stumbling into a problem and you're not even aware of it. I mean, for instance, I've got a friend who said, "Oh, I'm so bored now. I'm going to do my 2019 expenses." And I said to him, "You didn't do your expenses for a whole year? I mean, that's nuts." Yeah. in my book, but there's people who do that, and you know, listen, I'm originally an accountant by training, so personally, I do my accounts at least once a week, at least, I'm always on top of it, so I know exactly what the cash balance is, I know how long it's going to last, I know whatever is coming up that I need to manage for, fine.
That's great.
Okay.
I'm off.
Anybody bored yet?
No.
Nope.
No.
Or terrified, one or the other.
Brian, I wanted to go back to the timing that we discussed, you know, kind of the year, the 2020 is gone now, but maybe companies should also plan for the next 3 to 6 months. I mean, I don't think we should just wipe out the whole year yet.
Well, Aaron, you might be right, but the problem is nobody knows, So, you know, an example here in Portugal, So, are we going to have celebrations on June 10th? No.
No.
That's gone, you know, we know we're not going to see the Olympics. We know we're not going to see any of this stuff, this summer. So, you know, I hope I'm wrong. I hope, you know, this all comes back very quickly, but it may not. And you know, what's the old saying of plan for the worst possible outcome and then hope for the best. And that's all we can do right now, because none of us know. And I strongly suspect that when we get out of this, there's going to be a big bounce back, because I don't know about all you folks, but you know, if I'm sitting at home here all the time, you know, I haven't been to a restaurant, I haven't had a coffee, you know, all the things that I'm not shopping for, and everyone's going to be the same, you know. Everyone's going to have a big wad of cash in their pocket when all this is over, and just dying to get out and spend it. I mean, Sunday lunch, you know, for the first weekend when this thing is done, is going to be wild,
Well, I'd like to say something about that, because I think that can happen, of course, but there is a question of confidence. People must have confidence, and this is, I'm not a pessimist, but I'm a realistic guy, and what I see in tourism and of course in real estate, but mostly in tourism, is that Portugal will suffer a lot because of the confidence of the people. People don't have the confidence now. They will lose their confidence. And when they start travel, I don't know, They probably will go to the restaurants now, less than before, but they will go. But when you go to the restaurant, I ask you, are you not looking over your shoulder to see if the guy next to you is the right guy to be next to you?
Yeah.
So the trust is something that we'll need to learn and we need to understand. And it's probably the worst scenario for our economic.
Pedro, I have to agree with you, but at the same time, you know, realistically, this is going to be over at some point.
Of course.
And that's actually the other thing to think about, yeah, from a positive perspective. Yeah, it is going to be over at some point. That also means we need to be ready for when it's over at some point, because suddenly we're going to have, you know, all these customers coming to say, oh, I want this. I've been waiting for, you know, X number of months and so on. Now I want it now. Yeah. And you're going, whoa, hold on. You know, I can only take so much at once. And we'll have the opposite problem of what we've got now, that we might have too much work for a period of time. Yeah.
Well, I actually have this problem now, exactly,
Oh,
because we are still operating. It's not good. It's not good. We are still operating, and one of the things that we do is facility management, and we have clients that are demanding services, and we have clients in some part of the country that can help find suppliers, because people are afraid also, and they don't have the production because they don't have the product to supply. There is starting to notice that some short of materials, and in construction, of course, there is, and that reduction in construction that you early speak about, it's evident now. It's noticed, it's happening, and the construction companies are still working, but they cannot provide all that they are normally used to provide because they don't have materials. So it's a process. In facility management, it's normally smaller services, and it's very difficult. I'm trying to find a supplier for a company in Aveiro, one of the worst places in Portugal, and one of the companies that I call, he asked me that, okay, I will not go to Aveiro now. It's as clear as this. So we still have business to do, but we are noticed now that the suppliers are having their own problems, and this will affect us indirectly, even if you have our clients.
I hear what you say, Pedro, and one of the outcomes of that is you're going to start talking to other people, yeah, who normally
I am not talking
because
to
you have to right now, yeah. But you know, you're going to remember those folks who've let you down, yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, that's life, isn't it? But now you're actually seeking new suppliers, and this is what's crucial, because you know, just in the same way as this is bad news for the majority of people, there are actually opportunities within this. So for instance, those new suppliers that you're talking to, they're getting new business now that they wouldn't have got before, because you're being forced into resourcing who your supplier is. So there are silver linings around this, yeah, and it certainly shows that there, from a pure business perspective, we should be doing what we can. This is not the time to just kind of close the doors for 3 months and just forget about everything. Yeah.
That's definitely something that I've been talking with my colleagues at work. Of course, we are all at home, but we are still working. And this is one thing that is surprising. In Portugal, a lot of people think that being working in home is to being on holidays. It's not. We are still working, and we are working even, it's more difficult to work at home for a company like us, but we are still working, and we are still providing services to our clients. We have difficult to find suppliers, of course we have, and this will be, I think, even worse in the next few months, but we are still producing. And this is one thing that it's important for the companies to try to understand, that even though there is a lot of constraints right now, of course, those who can, because restaurants cannot work, simple as that. Yeah. But those who can should still working and trying to make that money that we need to provide. Our boss is always calling me, do you have all the accounts? Do you ask money for everybody? And yesterday I was asking money for people. That's something that you are speaking about a little bit. This is my job. I have to do it at home, but I'm still doing it. The problem with the suppliers is that a lot of these suppliers need to go on the field and need to depend on the supplier of the materials. And this chain, it's not broken yet, but soon it will be. And that is the big problem. For now, we are holding. If we can hold for maybe 2 months, it will be good. But after that, what I think it will be most important is the trust. We need to build trust again.
Totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. Yeah, and you know, they say you know, in procurement in general. Yeah, I remember when I started, everyone was talking about supplier relationships and partnerships and all this kind of lark. Yeah, and someone said to me once, "Well, the very minute you let me down, you're not my partner anymore." Yeah, and now, you know, obviously we're living in testing times. Yeah, but everything you're saying, Pedro, is that you know, you're in a business, you're under stress for different reasons, yeah, but you're going to remember those people who helped you, and you're going to remember those people who didn't help you. Yeah?
And I hope my clients remember me trying to help them. Yeah,
absolutely right.
That's the work. That's the work now.
Mm-hmm.
So, Brian, just an interesting point that you noted about Portuguese products and their export markets. As I'm interested in culture and helping companies to bridge any problems that they have when they're dealing with people from different cultures. And I was talking to the Portuguese Chamber of Commerce, and before I went in to talk to them, I had a look at the markets that the Portuguese tend to export to. And it's interesting that they play it very safe in terms of the markets that they target, that they are very similar to the Portuguese culture and the language, and there's a lot of lost opportunity, in my opinion, for Portuguese companies, because they tend to be a little bit, shall we say, risk averse when it comes to going into markets that they're not familiar with. And I think it's something that the government can do a lot to help Portuguese companies, to give them that support network so that they feel they can actually go in there. The other thing I'm getting from this as well is that, you know, the messages we're getting from all of our governments, because I lived in Italy for 18 years, I'm from Ireland, I'm now living in Portugal. So, you know, you're watching, I'm listening to the news from all of these places, and that at the moment, the government's focus is on keeping us safe, getting us through this, and trying to mitigate and contain this. And they keep talking about closing, you know, closing things down and keep focus on essential services. But it's clear from what we're saying here today is that there also needs to be a second strategy where the government are saying to people is, yes, you know, stay at home, stay safe, but also be ready. And, you know, that's something that they're not doing. The focus is on the here and now, as it should be. But maybe it's important to have that they start having that conversation with people as well, is because I think people are getting really lost in all of this and getting very, you know, they're going down the tunnel of despair, and people are talking about bouncing back, but there also has to be that conversation happening politically and among the governments to start people saying, yeah, it's really hard at the moment, but we will come out of this, and this is how we're going to help you prepare for that, and this is how we're going to help you be ready for that.
I think you make an excellent point, Sharon. I mean, here's a curious statistic. You know, it's a little bit different to different countries, but you know, we all think of, you know, when we look at our economy and we look at the big businesses, you know, and the big brand names and so on, and we forget that usually about 60% of the economy is actually run by small businesses, not the big guys. Yeah. And the disadvantage, of course, being in a small business is you don't have, you know, McKinsey coming in and giving you all this strategic advice and et cetera, because, you know, none of us can afford that kind of stuff. Yeah. So really that bounce back is not going to be down to the big guys and government strategy. It's going to be down to people like us, quite frankly. Yeah. And that's something that lots of people forget. So personally, I don't have, how do you say, a huge amount of faith in politicians generally. Yeah, not from a political perspective, but from a competence perspective. Yeah, they tend to find out after the fact of something's happened. Yeah, And if you're in business for yourself, we all make mistakes. We're human, but you can't afford to make too many mistakes. Yeah. So you kind of have to be a little bit ahead of the curve, and that's why personally, as I said, what I'm trying to do right now, I'm trying to do things differently now. Yeah. Which will hopefully then prepare for when the bounce back happens. The worst thing that happens is I do some different things now which don't work, and then when the bounce back happens, and everything's okay anyway, But it just might be that when the bounce back happens, it's actually better. And that's the kind of actions that people can take right now, when we're sitting at home and we don't have all those office interactions, and quite frankly, we can waste half our day having stupid conversations about how Benfica did last weekend. Yeah, so we can't do that at the moment. Yeah, so let's use our time to do something more productive, and that could be in terms of how we market ourselves, what our product offerings are, how we deliver our services. Some of these things we do need to think out of the box about. But that's where I think times like this, you have to look at this as an opportunity, rather than it's a complete disaster. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just to maybe to complement what you were saying and what Sharon was saying, maybe to bring a little bit of optimism on that. I think we have to start to think like post-crisis, and post-crisis. If you look at what's happening in Portugal from outside of Portugal, actually. If you look at the press, if you look at the way Portugal deal with things, I'm pretty positive about things. It's not exceptional. It's not exceptional anywhere, but Portugal is not as much impacted as as Spain, as Italy. I think tourism will still remain. That's true that there is seasonality, but I'm usually visiting Portugal for leisure twice a year, and I'm not going to the main season, and still I can find a lot of things opened. And there is the main reason for that. You guys have the weather. In December, there is no sun anywhere else in Europe than in south of Portugal. So I think between the fact that the Portuguese government or the Portuguese people have dealt really well with the confinement, and also that the impact of coronavirus is not too strong in Portugal for now. The fact that Portugal is maybe a tourism place, but also a lot of things around the food, around the wine, around a lot of different things that can be sold. There are opportunities on the ground to be transformed into different things that can attract people elsewhere. And then, it's as you were saying, Brian, I think it's very much down to us to look at, what can be done to protect suppliers, what can be done to protect us. And maybe there's a change of mindset. And to give you an example, one of my friends is from Taiwan, and she was explaining to me, she was very surprised because in Europe, when you check in an airport, nobody takes your temperature, and for her, from the time she was a kid, everybody takes temperature. So you go, you put your stuff, you put your luggage, and they check your passport. And if you're more than 37.5, what's happening? You don't board into the plane, Same with the mask, So I'm not saying we should all wear masks tomorrow, but it will be a point when the crisis, we also have to think optimistically, but realistically. And we don't know right now if this coronavirus won't come back next year differently. So what are the measures that we can have a look as businesses to tackle that? So potentially, I was hearing one of the supplier didn't want to come to Aveiro. Lovely place, by the way. Maybe it's a question of confidence, and maybe on the back of that, maybe with a mask, you could go to Aveiro. It's very strange, but it's. I feel that we need to kind of go outside of our boundaries and think, okay, we have a norm. The norm is to shake hands for business. The norm is not to wear a mask. But maybe tomorrow the norm will be slightly different. And we can adapt or we can reject things. But it's like it's managing change. And the one that will cope the best with change will get out of that. There's question of money. There is question of cash and capital. That's all true. But I think we are countering a very high crisis in terms of change management. We've never seen this change happening so fast. It's big things happening, and then how do we rebound? So probably the message, not really a question, but it's I think Portugal, even Ireland, has everything to be optimistic, mildly optimistic about the situation. And we should also realize that, at the end, there is always a rebound. I don't know if it's middle of the summer, I don't know if it's in the winter, I don't know if it's next year, but if we don't create this rebound ourselves, it won't happen. But we need to kind of put things in place for ourselves, for business and for community to be able to relaunch this, and probably not politicians, but I think we're all part of that. So that was more kind of an optimistic comments as a conclusion of this. And thanks very much, Brian, for the explanation.
Well, Gillian, where you're quite right is things are going to change. I mean, I'll give you a stupid example, okay? After the whole Enron thing in America, before that, it was a regular practice that I'd be taking clients to lunch all the time over there, all the time. And of course, I'm paying for it on the expenses, with the new rules that came out after Enron, companies weren't allowed to do that. So you take the guy for lunch, and then you say, no, we're going to split the check. Now, you now find that the business lunch idea in America is almost gone, completely gone. So that's a cultural change which has happened over the last 20 years. So, what we're going to see with this is, we talk about working at home. For some of us, it's going to be more difficult than others. Personally, I enjoy working at home. I always hated going to an office. So it suits me perfectly. And lots more people are going to find that, and then they won't want to go to the office anymore. And then I was saying to Arnold earlier, one business I was talking to their CEO, and he was saying, oh, we hired this guy to be our chief risk officer last year. Oh, that's great. But we haven't seen him in nearly 2 weeks because everyone's working at home, of course. And of course, they're going through complete crisis planning. And he goes, but I haven't seen this risk officer guy. I wonder what he's for. So there's going to be lots of people who find, they're going to be found out by this whole process, that actually they weren't doing a whole lot anyway. And because nobody misses them, they'll, there's going to be lots of things rethought like that. Or why do we have an office for 1,000 people when, quite frankly, we could drop it down to 200 and everybody could hot desk? People are going to think out of the box in different things.
Well, hot desking might be dangerous now as well, right?
It would be at the moment, but I'm talking about post-crisis. There's going to be lots of things which people held as kind of fairly axiomatic thoughts, which now they're going to come back and go, I used to always think it was like this, but maybe it isn't.
And I think a lot of companies
will change.
We will have been as well, maybe not as successful as before, but successful enough. And then things will happen like, do we all really need to drive to the office, go to this big pollution, get stuck in traffic? And then, there is, I think, to an extent, some positive things happening as well in the environmental space, without entering in a full environmentalist thing, it's a completely different question, not the purpose, but how the future work can happen, and it's a hard case, it's learning by doing, but I think there is also a lot of takeaways on that. And I love working from home. I think you're the same. And are we less efficient than when we are in the office? Don't think so. It's maybe harder for extroverts, but it's things for everybody.
But look at what we're doing this morning. I mean, Aoife, Arnold. Normally, you guys organize events where we physically come together and meet and shake hands and stuff. Okay, we can't do that at the moment. So now we're doing it like this.
Actually, we're going to stop events. We're just going to do webinars. That's the future.
But also as part of that process, you're going to figure out, well, this kind of works this way and that doesn't work in a way we expected, and so on and so forth. So it generates new ideas all the time and new learnings.
So I do believe this pandemic, it will be a milestone on our society, even because of that, because people will definitely need to change, and it's not going to be easy, of course, and it's not going to be immediately. I think the changes will be in the long term, and we will see greatly new difference on the working conditions of the people. And for me, probably less work because I don't have anything but so many offices to manage, but even though there is that will be a big difference, I believe, in the way that people work and in the way that the society. I have one question about the economics to do, because in this morning I was reading the Economist, and one of the headlines was that big companies will be even bigger. And so this is immediate. This is an opinion, of course, and opinions in economics are very difficult to accept now, because 2 months ago I was on an event, a personal event of a capital manager, an asset management company, Arcano Partners, and they are completely positive about the future. They say that the coronavirus will be a problem in Europe. It can be a problem in China, perhaps, but not in Europe. And 2 months after, we are in a recession. So
absolutely,
it's very difficult to make projections in the economy. But I definitely believe that this virus and this pandemic will be a milestone for our society as we know it, and things will change. Not immediately, because we all start when we are allowed to go out, as Brian said. We probably will go to our restaurant and you try to do all the same stuff that we normally used to do. Yeah. But in the end, we will need to face the facts. And the recession is there, and we will suffer. Everybody will suffer. And our society, I think, will change after this.
Well, I'm just conscious of time, guys. Yeah.
But
I think just one concluding remark. Yeah. We can all have opinions about this, that, and the other, and how long it's going to last, and what's going to happen, and they're all fair opinions. Yeah. But just remember one thing. Yeah. Your bank account doesn't have an opinion.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Excellent.
If there's nothing in the bank,
on that positive note,
it will be entirely worth it. Yeah?
You just ruined my 10 minutes of optimism that I tried to make.
I'm just saying, watch the pennies. Yeah?
The accountant has spoken. The oracle has spoken.
That's
wonderful.
And hopefully this time next year, we can all have a good laugh about all the stupid things that we have to do. Yeah, but that's the immediate thing for lots of people. Yeah, maintain that cash balance, and everything else will be just fine.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brian.
Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Have a good day, guys.
Excellent presentation. Bye-bye.
Yes,
Take
bye.
care.
See you tomorrow. Don't forget, there is one tomorrow.
Oh, yes. Okay.
It's at 2:30.
2:30. Okay.
Okay, great.
Ciao,
okay,
ciao.
Ciao.
Bye, everybody.
Ciao.